Share the cloud. There we go. All right, excellent. Well, welcome everybody so far. Oh, this one says 27 seconds, but we'll go ahead and kick this thing off. Welcome everybody so far to our Lean Coffee Table experiment. We're going to see how many people show up. We're going to see how many topics we cover, but we are very excited, Vicki, Lori, myself, to have you guys here and for us to be able to have this discussion around topics that we generate ourselves. So if you've never been to a Lean Coffee before, the idea of a Lean Coffee is that it's really led by the participants. And so we're in this very beginning here, so 5 minutes kind of welcome and training. And Lori, I'll ask you to go ahead and share the link to the tool we'll be using, which is Lean Coffee Table, in the chat. If you're able to, if you're at a computer and you can jump into that, inside that tool. Once you get there, I'll just quickly show you, it's going to ask you to say, hey, what name do you want to use? Please go ahead and put your name in there. First name is fine, so that we can have the conversation going forward and capture our comments. So you would just use the link that Lori is going to share, put in your name. We're going to start generating topics. And so you just start typing, here's an idea, here's another idea, things to talk about. And then you'll see on each of the cards, you have the option to vote. And so each person gets 3 votes inside this tool. And so put those votes on the topics that matter most to you. After 10 minutes of generating ideas, we'll pull topics over and start discussing them, and we'll do them 5 minutes at a time. And when we're done discussing it, there'll be the opportunity to vote. Do you want to talk about it more, or do you want to end the discussion on that? We'll all vote, we'll get that summary, and if we want to keep talking, we'll add a few more minutes. Or if we're done with that topic, we've covered everything we need to cover about SAFe or whatever it may be, we'll just move on to the next topic and we'll drag it over. So once the topic is over, we're just going to drag it to discuss, and then we'll bring in the next topic and we'll discuss through those. One thing I do want to say is at the very end, we are going to have a time for takeaways. So my hope for everybody today is that you get one thing that you can take away and say, that was a new thought, that was a new idea, I opened up my thinking to something, I'm going to go research this more, something that you can take away to give you some value out of our meeting today. So we're going to take the last few minutes of our time together and ask all of you in the audience for your takeaways so that we can share them and all grow together. Okay, so we'll go back to our agenda. So here's what we're going to do. That was kind of our welcome. And I'll let Vicki, do you want to add anything to that welcome?
Well, we're just really very glad everybody is here. We appreciate your support. And I do have a question. I know that we ran a test, and I'm uncertain now that I'm looking at the Lean Coffee Table board. I'm only seeing the item that I entered as a topic. So I'm a little unclear about when I get to see what everybody else entered, because I have a hard time believing nobody entered anything but me.
That's a fantastic question. And what I'll do here is I'll actually step over to the view, and we'll figure out why you're only seeing yours, and we'll get that sorted right now as we go.
Great.
So,
Thanks
okay,
so
everyone,
much.
Welcome. Lori will be managing the chat as we go ahead, but let's step over to the tool. I'm going to minimize my slides. We're going to close this window. So this is Lean Coffee Table. And so far I see one item out there. Let me shrink that away. And I still have my 3 votes. So we've got one topic out there. If you guys want to go ahead and use that link, open it up and start adding your topics to this. The good news is, Vicki, I didn't enter that one, but I see it. And so that makes me think maybe we've only got one topic.
Okay, cool.
So if you're joining by phone and you don't have access to a computer, we'll be kind of talking about these, discussing a little bit. But if you have a computer handy, perfect. I see more topics coming in.
Yep.
I'm going to go ahead and look at my notes and add in my topics. And then as they come in, if you see one that you like, go ahead and click on vote for that. You've got 3 votes. And if I open up the little window down here, we'll see how many people are in the tool and how many votes have already been sent. Oh, look at that. We've got several people in the tool already. You guys are amazing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17. We've got 17 people in the tool. Topics are starting to flow. You guys are rock stars. So we'll go for about 6 more minutes on topic generation. Let me put mine in there. I had it written down about SAFe, yeah.
Isaac, did you start your timer for 6 minutes or no?
No, I'm going by the clock for this one.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So there is a, yep, right at about 10 past when we'll transition. Here's the beautiful thing too. You can still add topics and manage your voting even once we've begun discussing. So if we start discussing and you say how this is going and the people who are here, I want to change my vote, I want to move it over here, you can do that. You can vote or remove your vote. And so the backlog will be live. You can adjust it as we go. So we're just going to take 10 minutes to generate our ideas, and then we'll switch over here in about 5 more minutes, switch over to beginning to talk about them. So thank you everybody who's jumped into the tool so far. Time for team start. Perfect.
So Isaac,
right.
you
While those are going
mentioned.
in, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, you mentioned that we might want some clarification around some of the topics. Would you like to try to do that?
I think now is a great time to do that. So maybe let's just all, I say all, Vicki, maybe you, me, and Lori can read through a few of these for the benefit of the people on the phone. I know not everybody is able to, we have 30 participants so far, and not everybody is able to jump into the tool if you're just listening online. So let's go ahead and talk through a few of these and see if we need any clarification to them.
Okay, well,
so
it may be less clarification than just kind of level setting so that we understand the person's intent. Some of them are pretty obvious, I think. Like, for instance, one is how to train people who join the team after a transformation activity. That's pretty self-explanatory. Here we have one unfortunately they jump around a little bit sometimes. As an agency working with a client, how do you set up a contract? Old SOWs, have requirements definition up front, fixed budget, timeline, and scope. Well, a lot of us probably understand that coming from, let's say, a waterfall background. Perhaps the person who contributed this might be interested in providing a little bit more context.
Sure, that was me. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to, go from like a fixed bid contract to getting a client familiar with like either a sprint by sprint setup where they pay per sprint and we deliver on the backlog. Just trying to understand if other people have other experiences with how to get away from like large chunked statements of work into a more agile friendly sort of arrangement.
Cool. Thanks for that, Aaron. And then we have another one here that might be good. How do you run sprints with separate dev and QA without QA getting slammed at the EOS, I apologize, and they insist on remaining separate? And for whoever contributed this, if you'd like to provide more detail, perhaps you can also share with some of us what you mean by EOS.
I think end of sprint is what comes to mind for me. But
yeah, that makes sense, but I just want to make certain. Does anybody like to provide a little bit of context for that particular item? All right, if not that, then we have a couple others. Lori, did you see any that you thought needed more clarity?
No, I think everybody's been really great about making their questions clear.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Also, I see that we have several people with their votes still. Some of you have already used your votes, and so we have some that are becoming the clear front runners. So I want to encourage you to go ahead and look at the topics we have. Either add a new topic, or maybe even add a vote to that. So I see movement happening on several of these, so that's exciting.
So that makes me wonder, Isaac, do you know with this tool if as you reveal the highest votes at the beginning and we start talking about topic, if people continue to add topics and continue to vote and that might change, we'll see that the next time we pick the next item to discuss? Is that
absolutely yes? And I'll go ahead and preview on my screen in the Zoom if you guys are watching. What we're going to do is switch over to kind of a Kanban mode here in a second. And so we've got the topics to discuss, discussing, and discussed. What I'm going to do is hit a button in the tool that sorts the list by priority and pulls over, or by votes, I should say, and then pulls over the top voted topics. And then we will revisit after we finish a cycle, right? We'll revisit, I'll do that, pull over and see if any new ones have higher votes or the backlog has changed, right? So we'll keep an eye on that. I believe that's how the tool is set up to work, and so we're going to try it that way at least. So excellent. Well, guys, about 10 minutes have passed, and since we have an open backlog that you can continue to maintain, some of you guys still have some votes, so feel free to put those on. I'm going to hit the magic facilitator button that sorts the backlog and should bring over our topic. So I'm going to hit sort and move. I'll give you 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. Hopefully all voting is in. Let's see what happens when we do this. So we're going to hit sort and move. Boom, it pulled over several that had high votes and it sorted them out for us. So fantastic. So there's our backlog. Whoa, I apologize for the long scrolling. So what we're going to do then is we're going to start the first topic. And just in case we have a cacophony of people who want to talk, right, and want to unmute and speak, we're just going to be, civil as we can with each other. And if you're trying to talk and you're not able to, there's going to be a comment section inside the tool. You can add your comments, and then if the opportunity comes where the floor is open, you can jump in and comment on that as well. That being said, I'm going to pull over the first story, which is how do you run sprints with separate dev and QA without QA getting slammed at the end of the sprint, and they insist on remaining separate. So let me actually pull that over here. All right, and so we're going to start with 5-minute cycles. So we have 5 minutes. As soon as I hit 5 minutes, the timer will begin. And so now all of you should see that timer burning down. You can add a comment to the topic down here, and so we can discuss this. So I'm just going to step back, and if you have feedback, you can put it in the comments inside the tool, or you can just unmute and start sharing your opinion. How do you run sprints with separate dev and QA without getting QA slammed at the end of the sprint?
Isaac, did I get that right? We all just write? We're not speaking?
Yeah.
No, absolutely. You can definitely speak. I would say if no one's speaking, feel free to be the first to speak. If someone else is speaking and you have a comment, you can put it into the comments at the bottom of the topic as I'd like to talk about this, but in case you run out of time, you can get it written down.
Okay, I got you. I would love to hear this person who posted that speak that topic and before we go do anything further.
Yeah, agreed. More info.
Hi, this is Rick. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think some of us were muted and didn't realize it. So go ahead, Rick.
So yeah, it is a lot of teams that I've worked with. The dev and the QA teams are separate, and they insist that they don't want to work together, so that development throws all the work to QA at the end of the sprint, and it really doesn't do justice to how we really want to run that sprint.
So this is Eric. Just to clarify, you're talking about 2 different teams, or you're talking about QA and development within the same team?
I'm talking about QA and development on the same team, but they won't cross function. So all the work at the end of the sprint gets thrown over to QA wall, and QA gets slammed, and everybody's pointing to QA to get things done.
So they're basically doing mini waterfall, right?
That's right.
Okay.
I would be curious, do they believe that there's a problem there?
No, they want to be separate, and they don't want to do anything else. So I don't believe there's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I use usually when before we normally even start work is I use what's called a lean squad working agreement, and it not so much defines how people will work together. It's more of an agreement. It's more of an agreement how they'll work from a more of a workflow perspective. So the insistence that they want to be, usually it's all agreed upon up front on how they'll work together regardless of the role specialty. So normally, you're testing not at the end, but throughout, or, at least more regularly than at the end of a sprint. But normally that lean working agreement that I have, we can normally tweak it in between sprints, but it usually defines pretty specifically how the team works together regardless of the role or the function. Otherwise, insisting that they work separately later on is sort of a violation of that agreement, right? Because otherwise it's not Scrum or not necessarily Agile if they're insisting to throw everything over the wall at the very end, that's like textbook waterfall, right? But again, it's just a tool. It may not work for everybody, but I tend to have better results when people start wondering, what they should do and when they should do it.
We've got 1 minute left.
Do the QA people see that this is a problem? I see the word slammed was being used to describe the QA experience. That sounds.
Yes, they do, and they feel they're overwhelmed at the end of the sprint. So,
Krista asked an interesting question in the chat. Are these two groups coming together for a retro?
they are, yeah. And
Okay.
that's brought up and try to solve it.
So this is Eric. So I did ask a question here. I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the team's burn-ups are normally hockey sticks where it's horizontal towards the end, where it kind of drops down. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so if that happens, then I wonder if you had an opportunity to, or the Scrum Master to review that, maybe in a retrospective or something, in some other session, and review that. And review it so that, to determine if it's worth getting some insights. Go ahead.
I love it. So if everybody would go ahead and vote for what they would like to do, we'll end or extend. And so we're going to catch all of our votes. I'll give everybody about 10 or 15. Look at this. Oh, we have a dead tie. Oh, one tipped it to extend. All right. So we're going to go, let's go 3 more minutes on this since it was so tight. We'll go 3 more minutes and continue discussion.
One thing that I can share is that, at least a belief partly, is that I heard a word should, and that's kind of a caution to me. I think when we try to bring in lean or agile practices, it's, for me, it's more what works for your organization or your team. I mean, clearly these are great guidelines. One thing I've seen work successfully in an organization was where the testing team ran a sprint behind. Now, obviously, that may not be ideal for what a lot of our beliefs are. However, it's something that might be a workaround short term. Sometimes it helps just to run an experiment.
Right, and that's kind of what we did most of the time, to run one behind. But I didn't know if
I would want to definitely.
Suggestions.
I would want to definitely encourage you to say, make sure that it's explicit. This is a stopgap measure we're moving towards. We're moving towards something different because, if you want to talk about what people getting into a waterfall mindset, the developer is developing 50 things and then throwing it over to QA in a sprint who can only do 15 or 20, right? That leaves them in the spot of saying, we're swamped, like we can't do this. And now the devs go, well, it's not my problem. I delivered 50 things. I'm doing my job. You're not. And it could really create that divide. So you'd want to be careful about creating a split on sprints.
And,
yeah, so our very own Mark Kilby made a great suggestion on using 5 whys. So thank you for that, Mark.
And I've seen Mark do this in person and very effectively. And for anyone who might not be familiar with the 5 whys, essentially just think of it as like being a 2-year-old. You just keep asking why. Okay, so you find out maybe it's really to go down to the root cause instead of looking at things at what seem to be the obvious level. So that's a great suggestion.
What I was doing in such situation, because I faced that in the past, that QAs, there was a bottleneck at the end of the sprint, and QAs were not able to work on all items that were waiting for their action. So we started from sprint planning to assess what is development effort on the issue and to assess what is QA effort required for the issue to get ready. And we were assessing that if QAs during the sprint are able to deliver that workload and to work on it. And also we were checking what kind of issues are going into the sprint. If some of them can be finished earlier and QAs can start working on them earlier, and some of them can be finished later. So it was something that helped me in the past.
Thank you. All right, we're back in the voting section here. So go ahead and vote for if you want to extend or end. We have more people going to the end side, it looks like. I think it's probably going to trip that direction, which is great. All right, 12-1. All right, we're going to end the discussion. So move it from discussing over to discussed. There we go. And let's pull in the next topic right here. Bring it over. Set the timer for 5 minutes. And the question is, how do you deal with sprint planning with a team that is responsible for new development, as well as handling bug tickets passed on from the support desk? And so maybe if Stefan, maybe elaborate a bit more on this.
Yeah, so I've just unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thanks. Yeah, it kind of makes sprint planning very difficult with they don't have a stable backlog, and some sprints there's only development work, and then during the week some support escalates issues to development bug tickets, and there's no separate team for dealing with bugs. So it's the same team that does development that needs to address bugs. And we've tried sort of experiments of saying, well, let's assume nothing is coming in, plan the development work for the sprint, and then there's kind of discouragement when something comes in and interrupts and they don't deliver on the sprint. We've tried planning some default capacity and say, okay, let's allow a number of story points, whatever you measure, or we allow 2 smalls and 1 large per sprint for bug fixing, and then no bugs come in, and then there's over capacity unutilized. So it's kind of tricky to. We've tried some experiments and haven't really landed anywhere. Just like to get some advice if anybody has some experience with this.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that context. I appreciate it. And one of the points that I heard in the chat was that work is work. It doesn't matter whether it's support or new development. And while I agree on the surface level with that, I have been in situations where I had both planned and unplanned work that I was expected to get done during a sprint. And I'm getting a lot of echo now. Sorry about that. And I believe that at least in our team, one thing that we found helpful was to retain a certain amount of the capacity for the unplanned work. We also ended up doing more of like a Scrum-Bon approach so that we could kind of handle that work a little bit better. I mean, Scrum only in that we had ceremonies and that we kept working within a sprint, but really more kind of a Kanban approach to managing the flow. I'm not sure whether this might help you.
Yeah, that's quite helpful. We're leaning towards where we are at the moment now is more Kanban, Scrum-Ban, rather trying to manage the workflow and the bottlenecks rather than really fixing a sprint up front. Although we still do sprint reviews because we find it helpful to do release planning and demos. So it's really helpful to still keep the cadence of the sprints and vary the scope of what's being delivered.
Hey, this is Steve Silbert. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Oh, cool. To me, this is about balance. If you look at the 4 types of work from Phoenix Project, this is about balancing 2 of those. What I found that's worked to some extent with the organization that I'm at now is that to teach them about how to make proper trade-off discussions. So understanding your velocity to start with and getting a stable velocity is a good thing. What we've done is a bug comes up, you have a very deliberate conversation about whether it's important or urgent. If it's important, it goes in the backlog. If it's urgent, we actually have the team story point those out and then go, okay, it's a 3-point. what 3 points need to come out in order for these 3 to go in. And what you end up with is if your stable velocity is, I don't know, 25 points, then you end up delivering 25 points. It may not be the 25 points that you talked about at the beginning of the sprint planning, but it's still 25 points. And what that does is that allows a team to make a commitment for velocity, for complexity, and then meet that commitment, which is good for them and it's good for the business.
Steve, thank you for that. That's a really great, that's awesome. That really helped me hearing that. So we're back into our voting section. So go ahead and choose your vote now to either extend or end. Good comments from everybody. Excellent. We've got 12 to end. So we're going to go ahead and end the discussion. Good topics. Thank you. I hope that was helpful. Moving that over to discussed. Coming back then to the next topic. Set the timer for 5 minutes. And we got, how do you break the "this is how we have always done things" habit? Excellent question. Rick, do you want to give some context on this?
Yeah, so in the great teams I work with, sometimes they want to stick with "this is how we've always done things." It's still delivering. It's still they're working way too many hours to try to get delivered. But, you know, you try to coach them in different aspects and different ways to do things. And they find that, you know, this is how they've always done things. So that's what they stick with, even though that the data points differently.
So this is Mary Carlton. Yeah, so what I like to do is say, well, let's, as an experiment, and it's not scary, it's not permanent, let's try that. Can we try it? And then, you know, make your case and then say, can we try it?
Hi, this is James. I don't know if you guys can hear me or not.
Yep, James, we can hear you.
I just wanted to quickly add to that. I run into this all the time as well. What I simply try to coach the teams is, while you guys are seeing success and that things seem to be working, Agile is about ever changing and ever evolving. So if you, as the previous lady just spoke about experimentation, keeping them in that experimental mode of how do we move to the next level, and getting them that while we've done something today, tomorrow we can do something different that may make us even more lean. And that usually goes back into examining their retrospectives, right? And looking at some of their metrics in terms of, are they sticking to their commits? Are they delivering against their commits, and all of those things? So if all of those things are lining up, great. If not, then using those things as another means and a catalyst of, yes, you're doing this and this is how you've always done it. However, there's still room for improvement.
I would say one thing that I've seen work well is just kind of framing everything as an experiment, right? Don't frame the change as permanent. You've always done this. Now you're always going to do this. Make it those steps of, hey, why don't we try this little thing? And if you get in a week and we don't see value, then by all means, we know what we're doing today, right? We can always pick a new experiment and run it. It's got to be small. And something I read in a negotiation book one time said, you know, make your ask, and in the event the person doesn't like your ask, cut it in half, right? So if you say, hey, why don't we try doing this thing for 2 weeks? And they say, no, we can never do that. Say, would you be okay to maybe do it for 1 week, or shrink the ask, whatever it is, and just kind of move it back until it's comfortable for them to feel safe experimenting. And then you got to manage the feedback to make sure it's safe and make sure they don't feel punished by, I took a risk and it maybe didn't work out and now I'm a failure and I'm going to lose my job. Make sure you create safety in the experiment. And I think that'll help kind of break that habit of keeping things the way they always were.
Something that I think is really important is we have this habit of, we as coaches have this habit of identifying where improvements are necessary, but not necessarily validating that the people we're working with agree. So if they don't think there's a problem to solve, they're going to be really unlikely to buy into whatever experiment we're trying. So with that whole meeting them where they are, I think there's a lot of value in figuring out how can we demonstrate what's really happening. Is it data? Is it, usually data, right? Like capturing things, maybe having conversations, right? Like I've worked with a team recently who thought they were delivering everything their customers needed, and it was internal customers. It was a platform team, and in fact, they weren't. So we actually facilitated a panel discussion between them, and it highlighted a lot of gaps they didn't realize. So sometimes I think before figuring out how to get them to do things differently, it's more about examining the way we are doing them today.
So one other idea I was going to, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Aaron.
Go ahead.
Okay. So another idea is when I first start working with a team, I try to have one-on-ones with each team member. And one of the questions I ask is, what do you think needs to be fixed? So that kind of adds to what Kristen was just saying. And I focus on that first to build trust so that they understand I'm here to help them, not just impose change. Because that's usually, when they see a coach, that's what they're concerned about. And I'm going to vote for extend so I can hear Aaron's comment.
I'll just start talking while people are voting.
Excellent. Yeah, while people are voting, absolutely. It's leaning that way, so go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I think of the, like acknowledging, like Kristen was saying, like acknowledging, like listening to them and understanding the needs, like, and also acknowledging, I think sometimes there's opportunity to execute, like you can go down the path of execute where you don't need to kind of break away and change things. Like you've got an established process and you want to deliver on that, and it's helpful to maybe not change things if you're delivering well. So I think that's important to acknowledge that, and then also acknowledge that there's another side of it, like, okay, maybe we don't always want to execute, maybe we need to think of things creatively and kind of experiment with different ways to do it.
I think it also helps that you don't rush in to say, okay, what do you think is broken? What do you think isn't working, right? You let them lead, on, where do you think we can improve, right? And so you look at the timelines and, so the data shows on average it's taken about 13 to 16 months to deliver something of value. Do you think there's anywhere we can improve on that, right? So we're all about continuous improvement, and have them sort of, you throw it out there and have it open-ended and let the team come back individually to say, okay, I think this is where we can probably use your help in maybe having a new approach, because the data shows that, we've had some consistent quality issues and timeline issues, and maybe just trying something different, not a whole 180 mandate, but just build in that, and let them feel like they're value added, and as far as shaping some of the process.
Yeah, I just want to add to that a little bit. So what you might want to consider is using metrics and finding out is the team adding value, and if not, or the expected value, and if not, then figure out why that's not happening, and start with that and say, okay, here's where we need to be, here's where we are, how do we as a team get there? And that could prompt change in the way they're behaving, and you can help guide them into those specific areas of improvement that you see.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to be Agile trained to show, cycle time and velocity on a waterfall or an Agile project. If they see the numbers, it might be much more telling to that point.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
I agree. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other thoughts? 20 seconds left. Yours for the taking. All right, I'm just going to drag this over then. Good conversation. Drag it over to discussed. Very, very well done. Moving on, keeping an eye on the time. I think we could fit one, maybe two more, probably two more here. We'll see. 5 minutes on the clock. Next, we train people who join the team after transformation activities. Mark, do you want to add a bit of color to this one, maybe? Okay.
Well, actually, even though he might not provide a specific context to this particular point, I've certainly seen this to be a challenge in a lot of organizations. But I even saw this in Waterfall when people were brought on to the project, such as me, like way after it was started and going on, and having to figure out who all the people were, the stakeholders, and what the actual intent was. That's a challenge in, I think, just about any product. So, or, organization. So I don't know that I really have a lot of successes to share, but I know I tend to have a communications bias, but I think communication is really important. Having a repository that's actually easy to navigate and find some of the things that are most valued by the group or the organization is a good starting point. And encouraging discussions, like for instance, even having a lean coffee in your organization or your team to help answer these kinds of questions. It doesn't have to be all the time, maybe once every 6 weeks. But especially I think lunch and learns, they can be extremely helpful tool. So those are just some ideas that I can share.
Yeah, I'll throw in there too. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say one of the few things I like about Scaled Agile framework is the community of practice idea. Having like groups come together on a regular basis to share, stories and activities and, experiences so that others can learn. So, yeah, that might be something to look into.
And then in the chat,
Excellent.
Mark made it clear that he was not able to join because of his audio issues. However, he did mention that their training is usually 2 to 5 days. And that apparently someone else suggested reviewing the working agreements regularly. So both the longer standing and the newer team members are familiar and can revise.
That's excellent. Thank you guys for those comments. I just want to say one thing I've done, and I think someone previously having a one-on-one with the team members. Once someone joins the team, one thing I've done is visit with them, about a week in, and maybe even a little bit further, and ask the question, hey, what's it like becoming a part of this team as you're learning the norms, you're learning kind of how the team's already working together and how it's different from other teams you might have been on, and then creating a repository of come in. So ask that question, what would you have liked someone to share with you when you started, right? And so whenever a new person joins, you have this nice kind of process. Hey, why don't you take a team member? Why don't you be a buddy and make sure you explain all of these things to this new person coming in? Because as people have joined the team after this effort, these are some of the things they might have gotten stuck on that they found was valuable for them. So creating a repository of regular things that this is who we are, our identity, and the team can share with to the team.
And a great lightweight framework to add to that, Isaac, is a book by Steve Troutman called Teach What You Know. I put it in the Zoom chat. Basically, it talks about how use that buddy to coordinate others to mentor on specific topics. So it's essentially your entire team doing the mentoring, and the buddy is more coordinating all that instead of being responsible for doing that. So a great book. I've used it many times for integrating new people into a team.
Excellent. Anyone else? You got 39 seconds. Plenty of time to get a good thought in there.
I just love all these ideas and really appreciate them. Thanks everybody who's been contributing and those who are just listening in the background. We also value your input.
Excellent. I agree with that. All right, pulling over our next one. And 5 minutes on the clock. This might be our last one. We'll see how long the conversations go. But some say every story can be written from a user's perspective. Is this true and why? This is from Krista.
Yeah, not sure I have anything additional to add to that. Just from a product owner perspective, we understand our customers really clearly, and a lot of times what you put in a story from an end user's perspective when it's something that they're actually doing is really clear, right? But then there are plenty of times when your devs are working on things that it's really hard to associate that to a specific process for a user. So just wanting some schooling on that, I guess.
I think the term user it's a generic word. It doesn't actually mean a person per se. So the user in the context or the perspective that you're coming at it, there's always a way to come from that perspective. I'll know in a lot of things that I'm coaching from a sort of BDD standpoint, it's important really about the behavior that they're looking to and the outcomes they're trying to get to, whether it be a technical story or a higher level epic like story. It shouldn't really matter as long as it's being written from the right perspective. It's not going to be user from like an end user, if that makes sense.
Often I'll use the term consumer as opposed to user to indicate who's actually receiving the value. But it still needs to be written from the perspective that the business can understand and see value that's being provided.
I agree, Mark.
And I would add to that, you need to make sure that the team understands that value that's being delivered. So I'll often ask questions as the team is going into planning, or even as they start a story. Do we really understand why? So we don't go too far and we don't go too short on delivering that value.
Yeah, and I think we run into this a lot when we write enabler stories, like purely technical stories. And, a lot of times the team members get confused about, do I really need to write it in, as a user context? There's no rule in the Scrum Guide that says that you have to write it that way. But for me, I think that as long as you can explain the value of what you're doing and how it helps your product in the long run, it's you don't have to say it exactly in that format.
Okay. Any other comments? Anything else you guys might add?
Often I'll reframe the user story template just to focus on the 3 types of information that we really want. It's who benefits, what do they want, and why do they want it. And that can even be who, what, why. And for some people, they resonate so much more with who, what, why than as a I want, so that. The intention is the same.
Or swap it around so the why is even first. I've done that too. So, but again, it's understanding what's going to resonate with the team. So I'm with you on that one, Mark.
So from our product owners or from even Krista, any additional clarifying elements? And I'm sorry, I cut someone off. Feel free.
I was going to ask the same thing.
I think that's really helpful. I think really getting back to the why are we even doing this can kind of relieve some of the pressure of, well, we have to write a story from the user perspective. But if there's value that you're getting and it's work that needs to be done, I'm not sure who it was that made the comment, but if it's work that needs to be done to make your product better, then it's value added work. So that helped a lot. Thanks, everybody.
All right, excellent. Any other comments from this one over? Love it. I think we have time. Let's slip in one more, everybody. We are flowing well. So we have the top one with 4 votes here. We're going to pull it over. 5 more minutes on the clock. As an agency working with a client, how do you set up a contract? Old SOWs have requirements and fixed budget, timeline, and scope. So how can we work with clients effectively? And I guess, Aaron, do you want to add anything to that, or people can jump in with their comments?
Yeah, this one was me, and I kind of explained it a little bit up front, but I'm just curious to how people might have a vendor and agency really. I
don't know if it's just for me, but Aaron broke up. He broke up a little bit there. Okay, yeah, some nods. Okay, yeah. So we lost some of your audio there, Aaron.
So Aaron, maybe stop your video and it'll help.
Looks like he froze.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and switch into the. Oh, there we are. Yes. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So just curious to hear other people's experiences with how to organize work with like consultants or with other companies. And is it, is it like a sprint by sprint sort of setup? I've seen that, or I've seen like, kind of old school, one big contract and fixed scope, fixed timeline, fixed budget. Just wondering if people have experimented with anything in between those.
Aaron, are you talking about consulting from a coaching standpoint, or are you talking about you will put together a delivery team?
Delivery team.
Okay. I think even though they don't have the big old book of requirements and that big upfront design, I think there's still something to be said about taking your own experiences based upon what they know they're looking for and deriving some agreed upon context around meaningful milestones, I guess you could say, and measures that you guys can both agree upon and stick to, and then use that as your formula. I think every client's going to be different in my experience. So in my discussions, which everyone is really understanding what they're looking for at first, what they're probably trying to produce, how much time they have, and then before deriving, what kind of budget you're looking for to give to them.
Okay.
And I would say from my side, something that is really important is just kind of levels going in and presenting, hey, this is the way we work, and here are the benefits, right? And really making that clear, the understanding of the benefit of we're going to do it like this, and we're going to have it not be all defined up front, but that means that you're going to be more of a part of the journey as opposed to us taking a big document and then taking off and then showing up in 6 months with something. Really explaining the methodology and why ultimately it's a benefit, I think, to the client you're serving. Because you're maybe possibly changing mindsets there. If they've never worked that way, this will be new and they'll be a new experience.
Hey guys, this is Marcy. I've been fairly quiet, but I've had some experience doing this, so I thought I could share. So what I've taken the approach with in this situation is moving to a delivery-based SOW approach. So typically what I do, the first SOW I write with the teams is that we'll come in and facilitate a user story mapping session and get their backlog created. At that point, it's up to them on whether they take that backlog and execute it on their own, or whether they hire us to do that, right? Obviously, we know our hope, right? But then at that point, the second phase that we go through is creating an SOW around the deliverable of an MVP product. And through that user story mapping session, we have had some discussions around what the MVP product looks like and what it includes. So it's a little more clear, and there's a little bit of we've done some high-level estimation and kind of come up with an ideal timeline for that, right? So then obviously you deliver on that, and then there's the next deliverable would be, do you want us to go through and do beyond MVP and discussions beyond that? So really focusing on, number one, what are the deliverables that the customer would want to have first and that would be valuable to them, and also thinking about your business and what the deliverables are that will help you get to a point where you're set up well to sell that next SOW as that one completes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Marcy, wow, what an answer. Thank you for doing that. That was very clear and very succinct. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, so it looks like we've got 8-4 for ending, so we're going to end it. And I always like to try to wind this up, definitely spot on time. So as opposed to pulling over another story, I would love to just spend a couple of moments doing a debrief on some of the topics that we have covered, and I'm looking to kind of assess the value. Give me some takeaways that you have or something that caught your eye, your attention, and tell me some of what this session has been like for you. Give us some of your feedback and experience.
Actually, I'd like also to note that we have some suggestions about perhaps how to run this in the future. For instance, one person mentioned that perhaps a continuous screen share is needed. If anybody would like to provide some kind of clarification or context about that, we'd appreciate that input.
Yeah, I don't think the screen share is necessary, because if we're all on the page, we can see the progress, and then it feels more interactive with the people in the room. That's my take.
I don't know if it would make a difference if people have two screens or not, though. I know I have two screens, so it makes it really easy for me to look at you know, the Lean Coffee screen and the Zoom screen. So for me, that would be great to see everybody's faces while I'm looking at the other screen. But if you don't have two screens, I don't know that the experience would be as good.
I don't have two screens and would really like to be able to control myself whether I'm seeing the Lean Coffee table. I like seeing all the faces.
Isaac, thank you for the question. I joined late, so for me, trying to get caught up, and my apologies to joining late, and I own that, but yet I also lose context of what we're talking about, so I like to go back to the question of what we're trying to talk and solve. So that also, but also to Mark's point, I like to control. You know, I like to have the choice of what screens I like to look at, and whether I like to look at the pictures of the people or go back to the question. Thank you.
So I have a question, Isaac. Do you believe that we started sharing the screen because we were talking about how initially we could only see our own screens, our own questions, although it looks like perhaps that wasn't truly the issue?
Yes, that was where we initially started. And honestly, as this whole thing is an experiment, I mean, I think, Vicki, I'm so glad you brought this up. We're looking for ways to, how do we clean it up and do it better, right? Like, what makes more sense? So I would definitely say I've got it noted down. I think next time we do it without, and at the end, same thing, do a quick retro and say, did that work better? Those who were on both, you know, which one do we like better? So this is part of the learning process.
Yes, and thanks so much for all your comments. For instance, one thing that someone suggested was that perhaps in the invite we could have a link to the Lean Coffee app itself. So that's a great idea as well. Thanks for that.
So actually, this is Eric. I have a question, and just to make sure that I direct my comment. The comments that are in the topics, is that something that anyone can add after it's been discussed? After a comment, not a comment, after a topic goes into the discussed lane, can anybody edit a comment or not anymore?
Yes, I think once we're discussing it, those comment sections are supposed to be open so that we just put comments in stream of consciousness. If you're not able to talk, you should be able to put a comment. And this is one thing I wanted to say, it's a great segue. I'm now hitting a button that generates a PDF summary of the Lean Coffee table experience. All those comments will be there with the topics. And then I'm going to upload our recording and that PDF to our Coaching Agile Journeys website. So all of you who are here, if you go to Coaching Agile Journeys, give me about a day or so, there'll be a section for Lean Coffee, and you'll be able to download that PDF summary. So all the comments that were captured in real time. So that's why if someone said something that triggered in my mind, I've jotted it in the comments. So it's now going to be in the PDF so that we'll be able to access that and have the book title someone mentioned or have the one or two thoughts that to me stood out in the conversation. But the goal there is that everybody can edit those, kind of co-edit those comments to keep a stream of consciousness as we discuss.
Even after it goes into the discussed lane, can anybody edit the comments or not anymore? Nobody can add any comments either?
No,
Ooh,
No, I have been trying, and I don't believe you're able to edit comments after it goes into the discussed pile.
Is that design intent?
So once they move over, it's locked.
That's a lean coffee design intent. That's not a,
Yeah, I
because
think
it's already done.
I think a couple of people put all their comments in the Zoom group chat. I know there was at least two folks that I know personally I couldn't either. I couldn't put it in the actual live Kanban board.
I was transferring a lot of them over as we were going.
So
Thank you, Lori. That's awesome. I can also upload the Slack chat. Sorry, I can also upload that when I upload the PDF as well. We can have the chat log from Slack as well.
Something else I'd be interested to know what other people think. I like the idea of not recording. I feel like people may be less open about the challenges that they're facing with their teams or their organizations if there's a preserved record of them saying the thing they're saying. I don't know how other people, I'm very sensitive to that. So.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And that's actually I would love to hear feedback from if anyone here says, man, I have a problem with us uploading this recording. I definitely didn't discuss this at the beginning as people were joining. I'm happy to not upload it and we can just put the files or put nothing out there. I'd love to hear from anybody here if you have an opinion one way or another, recording or notes, uploaded or not uploaded. I'm totally fine to facilitate whatever this group thinks. So anybody have feedback on that or other thoughts?
I didn't think anything about the recording. I didn't think twice about it. To me, it's not a big deal.
Well, and I'm curious if it has any real value. Do we think that people are going to want to go in and listen to old lean coffees?
I know for me, if I want to invite someone to a lean coffee, I would send them a link and say you can watch what it's like so you can come prepared. So I would use it as a training and an introduction, a soft introduction. If someone's never been to a virtual lean coffee before, this is what you can expect, just so they can be ready. That's how I would use it.
Yeah, and I just have to say that our recordings are very popular on YouTube. So I know that people go out there and listen to at least our sessions. And, I'd be interested to see what the numbers are on this particular recording.
Well, it makes sense to me that someone would go in who missed this session with, let's call it a subject matter expert, like the type of thought leaders that y'all quite often interview. So this is a slightly different scenario, so that's why I was curious.
Oh, Mark has a good suggestion. He said keep it for 30 days and then drop it.
That's a great comment. I love that.
Stick around forever. I think it's out there for a time being, and if you just state it out front, like, hey, this will be available for the next couple of weeks, and I don't think you just keep it perpetually.
So this is great comments, and it leads into I think the last question I need this group to give me their input on of a cadence. This is something that I found valuable, and that I think Vicki and myself and Lori might be interested in hosting on a regular basis. And so one of the things we discussed is maybe doing it monthly, the second Monday of every month. And if we were to do that, if that's something that we're happy with, what we could do is just have it automatically when a new recording's ready, drop the old one, and we'd always just ask recording because it'd be 30 days old. Right. So is that something that the first Monday of every month, would that be something you guys would be interested in? Was there value enough here for that? And you can either thumbs up, thumbs down, say in the comments, unmute. What do you think about that? See some thumbs up.
Yes, I don't have video, but yes.
Great.
Yeah, and that brings up a point, Isaac. We might also want to try to think about how to use Lean Coffee to do these kinds of votes where we're gathering this kind of input. I believe that you've pointed out such functionality before.
Absolutely, yes. And there's two ways we can do that. There's polling inside of Zoom. And probably the easiest would be to use polls inside of Zoom. And it's something we'll learn as facilitators to kind of maybe have some of these polls ready. And while one person's talking, the other person can start to poll up. We'll get better at facilitating these. Guys, this is the first experience I've ever had hosting one of these, and I think for some of us, first time joining one. And so thank you to everybody who joined and made this a successful experiment. We've learned a lot. I hope you took something away. I'll post the chat and the video, and then what we'll do is we'll schedule another one of these for the second Monday in November. So we're right at time to wrap up. So I just want to say thank you, everybody, again. Great feedback, great
Thanks,
conversation.
Isaac, Lori, and Vicki.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Have a great day, everyone. Bye, guys.